Hello and welcome to program. Now, where are we? Are we 60 or are we 59? My goodness, not another blonde moment. It is the 8th of December and it is 2015. Welcome to the Ammach Files. And as you know, we are on peoplesinternetradio.com. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to Stephen Roberts, Vin, and all the guys who've been helping me out along the year. How wonderful. So listen, guys, I wanted to just flag up the December 19th Ammach Christmas Bash. So it's a little get-together, 1:30 to 5:30, and we'd love you to come. It's going to be, we've got James Bartley. He's fantastic. He's coming on at 2:30 to give us about an hour or so. He's got some Q&A time as well for us built in, and he's going to tell us about MyLabs, the military connection with the ET stuff, and all that good stuff. If you want to come, do come along on the day. Send me an email to amash@hotmail.co.uk to let me know. There'll be mulled wine, mince pies, and some other goodies and nibbles. I'll be giving you the lowdown on things Ammach and the next phase of development for that. And I hopefully will be sharing some very interesting case files. So do be there. It's £20. So it's plenty of time if you want in the morning to do your Christmas shopping or to do a little bit more bits and bobs on that crumble time, and also in the evening. If you want to stay on for an hour or so afterwards, I'm sure we'll be there. So that is the Ammach Christmas Do on the 19th, and that is a Saturday. So we've got Canadian things tonight, and I have a fellow Canuck with me, and I now know that it is not a naughty thing to say. So I'm glad about that. I didn't know if I was offending somebody by calling them a Canuck. Anyway, it's lovely. So I am also that Canuck. And I was just having a look at some of the Canadian X-Files. One of the things that came up, a case that I looked at a long time ago, is called the Shag Harbour incident in Nova Scotia. And it happened on the 4th of October, 1967. It is a huge case. There were multiple sightings all over Nova Scotia and in that area on that evening, and multiple witnesses with some photographs. There were fishermen out there, and there were the Royal Mounted Canadian Police there. All kinds of people have written up articles and information about this, but it is still yet to be officially recognized, though I am told by my guest, I'll tell you about him in a moment, that there may be something coming down the pipe that could make a difference. Some news, so we'll watch this space, and I will let you know if I hear anything about that. But the Shag Harbour incident is known as the Canadian Roswell, though there's lots and lots of things that have been going on in Canada. Now, the Shag Harbour incident happened around 11 o'clock at night, and various parties of people around the area saw it. And what they saw was what appears to be some kind of craft, they think crashing into the waters down there. And there was all kinds of stuff going on. Now, about 30 miles away, where this craft also ended up for a time, was one of Canada's most sensitive Canadian installations, shared with the Americans at the time, which was, I believe it was a listening post for underwater magnetic resonant capabilities. I'm not quite sure what that was called, but basically they were checking the waters for Russian subs and all things like that. But basically they could tell anything that was on the waters, the kind of configuration, the boats, the ships, and everything else. So there was a huge interference that night. And whilst the Canadians have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police initially were quite open and said yes, there was something, because they were called to a scene where there were some youngsters out having a good time, and everybody was just astonished. But the Canadians, like most of us out in that sort of area, they take life as it comes. They thought it was a plane initially, so they dispatched some of the fishermen out there. It's a big fishing area down in that neck of the woods. And so there were, I'm not quite sure how many boats, 2, 3, maybe more, who were dispatched. And what they saw was not only a light in the sea, but they also saw quite a stretch of a very dense, thick, slightly yellow foam. And it was reported also to have a slightly sulfurous smell to it. It also had some uncommon properties when it was impeded, when it had matter put on top of it as well. So it has some very interesting, strange elements to it. which, and I don't know if that has ever been analyzed. I don't know if there's been any work done on that, but that would be interesting to find out. Anyway, so the Shag Harbor incident, I will do, before this year's out, I'm going to get some people together and do a proper shakedown of that whole incident, because it really is such an important case. And it is one of those that has quietly lain in the archives for a very long time. And I know that have been a lot of work, including people like Don Ledger. There's a documentary with a guy called Chris Stiles that you can see. It's about 48, 50 minutes. That gives you the lowdown on it, but it is really interesting. And it just goes to show you, folks, we are absolutely being engaged. So now I want to come on to my wonderful Canadian guest this evening, and this is Victor Viggiani. We had a fantastic chat, pre-show chat the other evening, and honestly, I don't know how we're going to fit everything in. But before we do, Victor has been working in this field for, gosh, over 30 years, and he puts out something called Zealand Communication. That's Z and land, and we'll put this information will be on the blog spot as well. The blog spot, the pod spot. So you can see all that, and you can also contact Victor if you want with any other details or information you might be interested in things Canadian. So there's one or two things that we didn't get to talk about, Victor, that after the song we'll have a chat about, and one of those things is the Resonance Project as well, the Resonance film. I want to talk to you about that with Dr. Lana Marconi, and I was trying to get her on the show as well, but we just weren't able to connect. But anyway, I want to hear all about that and hear about some of Canada's latest stuff and your own work. So first of all, folks, we're going to have Star People by George Michael from 1997. And he's singing that gorgeous song. And gosh, that's so nice. I like that. So we'll be on with Victor just after this song. Thanks, Stephen. Take it away. Oh, that was lovely. I think I needed that, a little bit of George Michael. So Victor Viggiani, welcome to the Ammach Files on this December day. Thank you for making the time. How lovely to have you here.
It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you. Terrific.
So I wanted to introduce your Zealand Communications News Network, because it is quite an operation, and you've been doing this work for 30 years. And as you say, it's dedicated to UFO and ET disclosure. And I had the Honourable Paul Hellyer on the show back in May, I think it was. And then you told me that you actually had a hand in his coming forward. And I think before we get onto your thing, I would just love to hear about that.
Oh, it's a million and one shot. And everyone, I would imagine by now, who's listening to your program is familiar with Mr. Hellyer's situation, so I really won't go into currently what's going on, because most of your listeners and viewers probably know about it. In any case, there are not too many people know how it came about, and I'll try to make a Reader's Digest version for you. Essentially, I was working at a radio station, CFRB, here in Toronto, and at the time we were doing a show called Strange Days Indeed, and the host there was Errol Bruce Knapp. And we had finished one evening back in one Sunday or Saturday night in April of 2005. And essentially what happened, the show came to an end, and we had guests on, et cetera, et cetera. And then the phone rang in the CFRB studios, and it said, there's a call for you in line 1, Victor. I said, well, yeah, we're just finished. I really don't want to talk to anyone. So I picked up the phone. I said, yeah, I'll take it. So it turned out that this fellow who knew Paul Hellyer way back then, and even before, he was his campaign manager during some elections. So he knew Paul very, very, very well, and he's also part of his own Bible study group. So he said to me, Victor, you need to talk to Paul Hellyer. And at the time, I remembered Paul as a politician, but I had never associated him with the UFO issue, and neither was he at the time. So it came out to me, anyways, completely out of the blue. So I just said, well, I'll call him, fine, thank you. I'm not sure why I'm going to call him, but I'll call him. So a couple of days went by, and I did that, and consequently, I got him on the phone, and I said, Mr. Hellyer, I got your name from Jim, so-and-so. He said, oh, yes, I know Jim quite well. I said, I understand that you're reading a book called The Day After Roswell by Philip J. Corso. And he said, yes. And I said, well, coincidentally, we are planning a symposium this coming September about the UFO disclosure issue, and because you're reading this book, might you be open to being our keynote speaker since you have an interest in this? He said, oh no, I could never do that. So the first request was denied because he had no idea what he was getting into. So I said, fine, do you mind if I call you back? So he said, sure. And I'd say about 2 or 3 weeks later, I called him back, and I said, Mr. Hellier, it's Victor Viggiani again. Have you reconsidered if you want to be part of this whole thing? And then I said, have you reconsidered? He said, yes, I have. I said, well, what are your views? He said, I will be your keynote speaker. And it just about floored me. I had no idea that he would accept. He had finished reading the book, and as a result of that, and calling a general friend of his in the United States Air Force, who said to him, Mr. Hellier, everything is true in that book and even more. And this general was instrumental in convincing Paul to come forward at our symposium, and that's how it happened.
And for those who aren't sure, Paul Hellier was Minister of Defense of Canada in, I think it was the 80s? Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, he was with Lester B. Pearson and Trudeau in the 60s.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so he is the most top-ranking politician, albeit retired, to come forward and talk about all of this stuff. Like Twining was the most decorated war guy to come. Yeah. Well, to give a deathbed confession. Anyway, this is all really great stuff. And do you know what? It's interesting, Victor. I'm noticing as I look around the world about things and how things are progressing, there's a lot coming from Canada. It's just as if the Canadians are very quietly rolling away in the background, and they're developing a lot of things and initiatives. And I think this is really exciting, and your work is all part of that. And I think it's always nice for people to know, your background, a little bit about where you've come from. I know you've probably talked ad nauseum about it, but I can start you off and say, I know you had read a book by Jacques Vallée on the UFO issue, and that maybe piqued your interest all those years ago.
It certainly did. That's what started it all. And at the time, I really had no particular interest in it, but the way this thing grabs you, it just out of the blue, basically, once again, because it was something that was totally unexpected. I was strolling through a bookstore, picked up the book, and began to read it. And I said, what is this all about? And it enthralled me. I landed up reading the book 3 times before I even began to understand what Jacques was talking about at the time. And as a consequence, I got involved with MUFON over here in Canada. I separated from that group because I didn't really like their approach to the way things were being cataloged and so on. So it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I began to become more involved in the exopolitical philosophical position, the worldview on how this thing has to become part of an open dialogue in society, and we have to make it okay to talk about it amidst all of the noise that the media creates to subvert that kind of information. So that's basically what we do. We open up dialogue opportunities for people through press releases and different kinds of interviews, tours, everything. That we're doing a lot to not just prove the facts of the matter, because we feel the facts of the matter at hand are self-evident. There's no need to continue to prove these things. You make a point of stating it, and then you move on. And that's where we're at with making this thing something that's okay to talk about, both among the choir, the people that know about this stuff, and reaching out to groups who have no idea about what the whole situation is with regard to the extraterrestrial engagement. I have some stories about that in terms of people I presented to who have no idea about this stuff. The civic groups, and you ask them, does anyone know anything about the disclosure movement? You get 0 hands up. So there's not really a wealth of knowledge out there, and it's always fantastic to talk to people who have no idea what's going on, to open that reality, to allow them to consider it.
So, Victor, I know that you have also done things like send out the equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act about certain incidents, and there's one in particular involving NORAD aircraft. And I think, again, that's a really interesting thing for people to hear about, simply because it's material, it's documented, and it happened and it occurred, and it's NORAD craft. And I think if you could run us through the story of that, that would be really fascinating for people to hear.
Yeah, essentially, it was obtained through our Access to Information Act. That's similar to the Freedom of Information Act,
Yeah.
and the same kind of thing. And the request that I made was, I want all information about times that jets have been scrambled to chase these things, and any other related UFO information. And they sent me back 113 pages of information, mostly sightings, but some pretty good stuff. RCMP was involved, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, with their officers actually filing sighting reports, and it's logged into into their logs. So it's something that happened that the people are talking about. So what happens as a result of all of that is that we get an insight into the kinds of things that not just the government knows, okay, but the people behind the scenes, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think that's the whole political bent of what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you give
Do you
us
want me
some
to
more?
go through do you want me to go through the actual sighting of it?
I think it would be interesting because it's
Sure.
quite
Okay, that's
unusual,
great. Sure.
and we're not familiar with it over
Yeah,
here.
okay, that's fine. Essentially, it's a line by line description, an air traffic control log, and each second is cataloged by minute sections. Every 5 or 6 seconds, there's a statement by either air traffic control or the pilots themselves, and it
Now,
goes to.
Victor was, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Did you send me, was that one of the little two-liners, the little
that's correct.
snippet that you sent?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do whilst you're telling this, I'm going to see if I can find that. It was just one of those. I'm not sure I got it up in time, but I'll see if
Sure.
I can
That's
get
fine.
that out
Okay.
there. So please continue. That
Yeah,
would be
essentially,
great.
they picked up on radar, NORAD, the North American Defense System. NORAD picked up three unidentified objects, and they don't call them UFOs. They call them unknown targets or tracks of interest. They don't call them UFOs. And two F-16 jets were scrambled sometime in September of 2001 to chase these things out of Comox Air Force Base in British Columbia, and they got up to about 35,000 feet, and that's where they, as you'll see in the clip, where they caught on radar these jets. They just could not find out where these things were. So once they tracked them, they attempted to catch them, and they just zipped out of control. They couldn't be found anymore. And one of them headed down onto the ground, and two continued. So once the actual contact was made, and it says they made contact with these things at 35,000 feet. This is what
Yeah.
the radar is saying. So it's a clear confirmation of contact, and it says it right in the document. I'm not sure if your viewers can see that, but it says.
I'm just looking up. Sorry,
It's okay.
there, Victor. I'm just trying to get up the little yellow backed.
Sure.
Because that is fascinating as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
I don't know if we can show that one, Stephen. I'm not able to see it from my
Yeah.
side. But anyway, he'll let me know when that's up.
Mhm.
But yes, so sorry, carry on. That's just really fascinating because
Yeah.
it's clearly evident that is.
That's right. And we have, factual data. And people are always saying, well, there's no data about this stuff. Well, you can't get much better than that. When it says contact made,
Yeah.
and we know that our F-16s fly in excess of 700 miles per hour, and these things far outweighed that slow speed. So
Yeah.
they did things in the air that just is totally unconventional.
And was that also, Victor, the ATI document?
Yeah,
that you sent?
yeah,
I'm
the same
just,
thing. And it's the same kind of
that's the
background.
same thing. We just didn't have folks time at the last minute to get everything
Okay.
down ahead of time. But, it is interesting, and I'd really like you to see it if I could get a hold of that, because
Well,
it's,
if people want to, they can just go to our website, and the documents are all right there. If they just
yeah,
Google Zealand Communications and go to the NORAD documents, all the clips are right there
yeah,
if
that's
they
great.
wish.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see if we can just get that in here as well, so people can see that. But bear with me a second, folks. So anyway, so that is ongoing now, isn't it? I believe that this is still current.
Of course. Well, what we did, we filed all this information to three so far ministers of defense, and Peter MacKay was contacted about this, and I asked him 10 questions about this stuff, and he sent me back an email that I told him we've got these documents, they're here, it's a line by line thing that Nora did. You as a defense minister should be aware of this stuff.
Yeah.
We need some answers. What was this all about? And essentially, he wrote me a letter back saying that A, he couldn't find the file, if you can believe that. Minister of Defense cannot find the file that's in his own archives. And then B, he went on to describe how this thing could not be anything else but either a plane with no transponder, a small plane, or a flock of birds. And at 35,000 feet. I don't know too many birds that I'm aware of that fly at 35,000 feet. So it was a bogus attempt to explain away ignorance, and we're continuing to present this information, and we're hoping that here in Canada we had a new election and we have a new Minister of Defense and we can submit this to him. He may be a little bit more open to all of this.
Well, I have to say, I actually did send Justin Trudeau some kind of email mentioning about the UFO side of things as well.
Yeah.
They've just put me on their mailing list, which is
terrific. Terrific.
Yeah, but I think it's again, you're just wearing away the stone, hey, and that's really important. So.
Yeah, it is. Well, I always say when I speak, I to these people that really don't understand the issue the way we all would like them to, and you don't want to convince anybody, but I make a point. I said, listen, I'm not going to give you comfortable information here. I'm going to brush the fur the other way. I'm going to irritate you. And that it may irritate you into total despondency, or it may provide an opportunity for you to look at the information, and you have to make a choice. So that's what we do when we present to people that aren't totally up to speed about all this, but have an openness for it.
Okay, well, I've got a question from young David up there in Lossiemouth, and he says, do you think, Victor, really that a totally controlled Scottish Rite, Freemasonic, Illuminati government like Canada will really allow their population access to the control truth regarding our space families? It will all be stage managed and controlled as the moon landings were.
Okay. What was the initial reference?
He just said, do you really think that a totally controlled, about disclosure, all the rest of that, that a totally controlled Scottish Rite Freemasons, Freemasonic,
oh, I see, okay,
government like Canada,
yeah,
you could say anywhere else for that matter at the moment.
It really, I beg to differ in a lot of ways. They may have interests in the rights that he mentioned, the Masonic Rite and the Scottish Rite. They may have interests in this or knowledge of it, but they by far and away have no control over how this information is being propagated or not propagated. The people that are in charge of this information are at a level of basically we don't know who they are. It's not the typical alphabet soup group of agencies. So we really don't know who's repressing this information.
About the beyond those guys also.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, at what level does this exist is the big question. And if it resides at the Masonic level, then there may be hope. I don't know, but I don't see them as being the all tellers of or controllers of how this information is going to be propagated or not propagated. I really don't see the connection there at all.
Yeah, I think the connection being that so much is stymied. I mean, Canada, England, wherever, through these various secret societies, and they, have their systems that they, keep the lid under. So I think that's where that was coming from, and Canada is very tied into the UK, of course, Australia, and all that. Course, so I think that's all of that. I mean, listen, we all absolutely can't wait for disclosure. It's just that we're all going, how's that going to look? What's that? Is it going to happen? But frankly, this is also disclosure. This is soft disclosure. I'll call it soft disclosure. Yeah. This is us doing this, kind of an interview at a time, and a conference at a time.
Yeah. The organizations that your questioner sent in, it is part of that network that represses the information. By far and away, I do not doubt their influence within the issue. They do have a role to play in repressing this information at a certain level, and. But they're part of a network. Let's put it that way.
Okay, okay. Well, he's of the mindset that they could totally control the Canadian government, but totally, and I think that we could say, well, there's control everywhere.
That's right, of course, yeah.
So, so anyway, and talking about the control thing, I think what's kind of interesting, we were discussing about the NASA symposium, and I think it would be quite interesting just to talk a little bit about that because that sounds on the face of it something fantastic, a movement forward, sounds like it's got the right people on board. And as usual, we find ourselves with the same suspects not addressing things as really they could be or
That's
should
right,
be.
yeah.
But anyway, tell us about the NASA symposium because that sounded amazing.
Well, yes, it was a symposium sponsored by NASA and the Library of Congress. And they invited, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many speakers over several days. There had to be at least two dozen speakers. It was just a wonderful assembly of people looking for ways of understanding the possibility of an extraterrestrial presence. And they had these workshops and speakers, and they all made very, very good cases for the possibility of some kind of life beyond the planet. But they skated around the issue the whole time. They really never came to grips with the fact that we are being engaged. They're looking at methods of observation. They're looking for signals from space. That's as far as they've gotten. They don't understand that we're not. It's not going to be a signal from space. They're already here. Okay, they're engaging us right now, and they completely and utterly refuse to broach those issues about how this is a very present, modern day, well documented phenomenon here on the planet. So they're in a state of denial, and this is an official organization of huge magnitude. So it really represents a worldview that really wants to control this issue to a point of keeping people in a pre-Galileo kind of stage of understanding of our place in the universe. And that's what I think is happening here, with officials making these kinds of pronouncements and essentially saying this is the gospel of so-and-so. And it's no longer good enough. And so we chose to take umbrage with that, and we sent them an open letter. You can see that open letter on our website to NASA's effort, and it was, we think, a very good understanding of what more they needed to do. They needed to do more, go one step further, and take a look at the other part of the issue. And what effect that's going to have, I have no idea. But the fact of the matter is, we had to make a statement in deference to that whole dialectic between that worldview and the other worldview that we're trying to move forward in the human agenda.
Yes, that's up on screen now. We managed to pull that one through, which is great. And I was talking to you as well, Victor, about the 2010, the couple of conferences I went to with the Royal Society here. And honestly, they were like a matched pair. I mean, we had people like Paul Davies, we had, it was just absolutely astonishing. And one was in January 2010, and that title was The Royal Society and the Detection of Extraterrestrial Life and the Consequences for Society and Science. There was nothing really, honestly. I attended that one, and I also attended the October one, which was towards a scientific agenda, scientific and societal agenda on extraterrestrial life. So basically the idea sounds like that they're actually seriously looking to discuss, what it's going to be like, what that is going to look like when we discuss, talk, meet, have interaction with these others, and have them feeding into our social structures in every which way. But it wasn't. We had. It was very interesting because on the October one there was Seth Shostak, and honest to goodness, I mean, it's really. I mean, I'm sure he's a lovely man, but he's just there holding the fort for, holding the cover up. He's the one keeping the curtain closed, so we don't see the little man behind the screen. He's one of the many holding the curtain. So, we don't click our red shoes. But they had some interesting titles, and I just want to try and find one. And there was Professor Simon Conway Morris from the University of Cambridge here in the UK. And his talk was called Predicting What Extraterrestrial Life Will Be Like and Preparing for the Worst. What does that tell you about, supposedly some highly educated people out there who are, I don't know, is this serious or what? I mean, it's crazy. There was another talk called The Implications of the Discovery of Life, Religion and Theology. And another one was Fear, Pandemonium, Equanimity and Delight, the Human Response to the Extraterrestrial Life Situation by Professor Albert Harrison. So all of these different titles and all of these, it sounds wonderful. There's so many. This was over a couple of days as well, some of them. It's like blowing in the wind. It's just like so much candy floss. And, it's like the packaging looks great, but there's nothing inside. And so, it's kind of, we know, all right, we've done that. We know we can move on now. So maybe you can tell us, Victor, how you are interfacing with the exopolitics side of things in Canada, and maybe how that, or if you are even, how that's cascading out across the world of exopolitics in different countries. I don't know if you do engage, much outside.
Yeah, I work with different exopolitical oriented individuals, not all within the same organization.
Yeah.
The whole idea of exopolitics is to look at the kinds of players that are involved in the whole issue of how this, once again, how this information gets propagated. And if you're taking a look at an organization, say like Michael Salas with the Exopolitics Institute, that's one branch of it. Another exopolitical group are all of the exopolitical organizations throughout Europe, the United States. There are Exopolitics Germany, Denmark, Japan, you name it. In each country, there's an exopolitical organization of some kind. So there's a lot of interest in this globally. So there's a network of people that are looking at what the implications are of this entire issue, not necessarily what it is. We all, like I said earlier, we already know what it is. So we just have to sort out the furniture on the dance floor and find out exactly where everything fits, to move on to the question you raised. What's it going to be like when we engage? So let's just let's grow up here, okay? We need to come to the conclusion that we need to talk about this. And you have to make certain assumptions about how you want to talk about it, set the framework. And that's what I think exopolitics does. It sets the framework for discussion about this whole issue, not necessarily providing all the answers. And I think that's a key component of what we do. We just want to create an open dialogue about this publicly.
Yeah. So I think we haven't done this sort of the right way around, but I think it'd be quite interesting because you're passionate about the education of people and about the education of people in this subject. And that's because your whole background and field and degree, master's, is in education. And I think it would be quite interesting, again, for people to hear about some of your experiences, perhaps with children that you might have come across at school, who you maybe think had something going on with ET.
Yeah. Well, that's a very delicate and highly sensitive story that I'm more than willing to share with you. For a number of years, while I was doing the radio program Strange Days Indeed here in Toronto on CFRB with Errol Bruce Knapp, we engaged more and more with all kinds of so-called experts that have delved into the field of alien abductions or experiences, John Mack being one of them. And your listeners and viewers are probably familiar with Dr. Mack's work at Harvard University. I spent some time with John at his offices for over 2 days talking about this because an incident came to my attention while I was principal of a school of a little boy who had all kinds of different behavioral problems, and it was a very, very touchy situation, a very poor home life, and things were not looking good for this little boy in grade 2, okay? And one day he came into the front of the school, his collar was all ruffled, and he had his lunch bag clutched in his hand, and he looked really, really upset. So I'll call him Charlie for lack of a better word. I said, Charlie, come on in here. You look very upset. let's calm down before we go into class, because I knew if you went into class in that condition, things would explode. So I kind of short-circuited that, brought him in the office, sat him down, and said, fine, what's wrong? And I said, you look like you haven't slept at all. And he said, no, I didn't sleep at all. No, and he's fidgeting in the chair. I said, just calm down. Everything's going to be fine. I said, why didn't you get any sleep? What, did you not sleep? He said, no, I didn't. I said, why? And then he stopped shaking, and he looks at me, and he says to me, they came back. And I sat in my chair, and I said, what? He said, they came back. He repeated it again. I said, uh-oh. Who came back? He said, the little monsters. I said, oh, okay. Now, you're principal of the school. You're involved in this whole issue. How much do you delve? How much do you inquire? And it's a very, very slippery slope, let me tell you. And I asked him where these things came from, and he talked about an orange light that he saw through his window, and that the orange light was there, and through the orange light and the window came these little monsters, and to stand around his bed. And the fact that he mentioned the orange light was very indicative of some of these type of experiences among children. And I said, how did they get into your room? Did they open the window? He said, no, they came through the window, right through it. It didn't open. And I paused again, and knowing full well now that something really, really strange was going on, I really, I tried to console him. And that was essentially the end of it. Now, other situations happened with that child. That child moved on to another school, and so on and so forth. But the fact that a child would disclose that kind of information to me, and it being in the context that I was aware of, if he'd have told that to anyone else, he would have been just sort of laughed off as, hallucinating. However, the context in which I received that information totally changed my perception of the nature and authenticity of the information. So that's an important distinction to make, of how children can be affected by this, and they are in fact being affected. And we moved forward with that, and found out more about the whole idea of educating people to recognize these kinds of things among students.
Yeah. Did you have an opportunity to talk to any of the family members about that, there, Victor, or was that
Absolutely
not really
not.
appropriate?
Absolutely not. No, there was not. The other little fellow that was in grade 6. A similar incident, but not as, it was to do with artwork, and it wasn't something. It was sort of on the edge. And no, I would have been absolutely foolish and in jeopardy of losing my job if I contacted the parents and said, I think your children are being, whatever.
Oh no, I just wondered if they might have, there might have been any contact where they said, something's going on, and whether there was any communication on in that way at all. Yeah.
I just chose to completely bow out of it. I couldn't.
No, it is. It's very interesting,
yeah,
because.
For sure. So that was as a result of doing some investigative work with John Mack and other people too. So it is important to understand that there is an educational process here involved, and the extremes go to all walks of life and all age groups. So the fact that this may be happening to a range of people of a range of ages is something very, very significant that we have to talk to people about and find out the nature of what this really, really bizarre phenomenon is all about. I'm not talking about lights in the sky. I'm talking about people interacting at a first level with these beings, some by their own consent and some not. We have to figure out what that's all about and talk about it more.
Yeah. So on the children side of things, I think that's fascinating as well, because I've had 1 or 2 calls from mums and dads who have really been very scared to speak further, with one mum saying, well, I can't speak about it again, and I can't speak about it to my partner because he's terrified that the child will be taken from us by social services, and we'll get sectioned or worse, never see our daughter again. Mm-hmm. And it really is something else when we can't even allow the children to speak like that, and it with such serious consequences. So indeed, we have to be really careful, and I'm hoping to get still at some point some workshops together. I kind of put a plan out for again, sort of workshops with a child counsellor, to do with myself, to do with mums and dads, and getting children involved. But I think that's going to be for another year or so down the line. It's still sort of cooking away there. And again, just because parents are just so conscious of the predicament or the potential danger they have. I mean, it really is quite a shocking state when we get to that point, because then we can't support the child as much as we'd like to. And but do you have many reports from mums and dads with children? Do people come to you with that kind of information? I know you had the school child, but that was in your school as you were there.
Yeah. Not lately. Let's put it that way. Not lately, because I've chosen really to out of I guess, I don't know, a lot of hesitancy. I need to pull back from it. It was very, very stressful, extremely stressful. And it got to the point where calls in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 in the morning from people who wanted to talk about what they were going through, and it really was very stressful. So I really had to remove myself, because I really didn't have the clinical background necessary to handle it in a clinical manner. Only just the background that I have in counseling, and it's really not enough. And I can listen to people, I can do certain things to agree with, or at least understand what their experience is, but to actually do something about it, that whole fix me kind of mentality, I wouldn't even want to go there at all. So I've chosen more or less to back off and observe and just admit that this is part of the phenomenon, and not the only part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it isn't at all. It's just one of those more sensitive areas where we just have a lot of difficulty moving forward in that. So I saw the trailer, Victor, for the film The Resonance, and that's all I got to see. And I hear that you were quite involved in that, which sounds great, because I know that the Resonance film, a documentary, which is by Dr. Lana Marconi, actually premiered in Canada on the 21st of November. And you were quite a part of it.
Yeah, it was actually an amazing afternoon. Dr. Lana Marconi producing the Residence, the Residence was a real. I think it sort of set a standard in documentaries. She covered all the bases of just about everything that you'd ever want to imagine, and it was really an attempt at isolating and crystallizing the kind of issues, what we call converging lines of evidence, not just one set of information that sort of makes a point, but you have to take a look at the dots and how the dots are all connected. And I think what Dr. Marconi did in The Resonance was she did that. She got all different kinds of, some disparate, some sort of in the middle of the road, but she found the commonality of all of them, and brought them forward in a way that people can understand the real complexity of this issue. This is not, like I said, about lights in the sky. It's about the lies on the ground. So we really have to make those distinctions of what we pay attention to. And each one of the speakers, I think she had 12 speakers involved in this documentary. And I'll tell you, each one of them she captured just spot on. It was amazing the kind of information she was able to draw. And all the information was so differentiated. It was all very, very different, but it had a commonality to it that really resonated. Thus, the name of the film, The Resonance, because all the information did, in fact, resonate with the reality of what was, So, Victor, because a lot of people won't know, and I haven't got the trailer for that up at the moment. Can you just run us through the sort of areas that she was covering? I know you said she went through, a lot, because I know you were also involved, and I take it were you doing the exopolitical side, or were you doing the research side, or a bit of both? A bit of both, actually. Sort of explaining my role as a news service. That was all part of it, but more towards the idea of what disclosure really meant. The basic theme of the documentary was disclosure, and how disclosure is going to happen, and what are the forces propelling it. So in a lot of ways, is what you mentioned earlier at the beginning on top of the show, is sort of a new look at the possibilities of what things are going to look like. And I think that was one of the points that she tried to make. What's it going to look like when we start talking to these beings, or at least admitting that we are being engaged? So on that part, and the other really interesting one was that the way Patty Greer brought in the crop circle, the crop formation phenomenon, to listen to Patty talk about that and how her information resonates with disclosure. It's becoming, venues, the language of disclosure. These crop formations are incredibly complex, and I think are a strong signal that there are some forces that are going on that are affecting our planet in a real tangible way that's just not being looked at. So I think it's all part of that resonating body of information, and Patty was really good at bringing that forward. As some of the people who discuss the idea of consciousness. I don't know if you want to talk about that right away, but the idea that all matter in one way or another is linked, and that we are all part of a cosmos just sort of teeming with life, but we're connected in some way through our consciousness. And this whole oneness of being is a totally different pursuit in what we're looking at, and that moved it forward again, just a little bit more esoteric in its approach. So we're looking at that as a really, my apologies, I hope. We're looking at that as to be a real strong feature about how all the information can come together.
Oh, it's Charlie. It's Charlie the dog. That's what I'm hearing. Is that right?
I think so. Yes, he's behind closed doors right now.
Was that here or was that there?
Hope it didn't spoil the party.
He did not. He did not. He couldn't.
Yeah, it was a very complex a documentary, and we hope to move it forward and extend it to other producers to see if we can't move it forward as an entity, both on the internet and privately.
Yeah, great. So who else was featured in it? There was yourself, obviously. Did Lana Marconi, did she actually feature in it? Is she, I don't know what else she's doing in this field, whether she's just, doing the filming and producing or whatever.
Basically, yeah. No, she was not. She was not in it at all. All the people that she interviewed, Michael Horn was interviewed. Paul Hellyer, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, was interviewed. Who else? There were a number of other people. I don't have all the information up here right now, but Patty Greer was one of them, and really she went into a whole lot of different areas about it.
Yeah, that's great. So has that again had any kind of media spin-off in Canada? Has there been anything from that?
Unfortunately, to this point, I think only one article in it was called Vanity Magazine did a write-up about it, but that's the only media traction, unfortunately, and that's the nature of the beast here. Most of the time, it doesn't really cut that glass ceiling. So it's something that I think we have to understand. It's a move in the right direction, but it really wasn't enough.
Yeah, you were talking about this glass ceiling before, Victor, and I've talked about something along similar lines, and it is absolutely right, isn't it? We do keep buffering up against that, and I don't know about in Canada how there are the different groups there are, whether they connect or not, whether there's lots of different exopolitical groups out there or and support groups. Is there much going on outside the hub of Toronto where you are? How does that work in Canada? Or I don't know if you know.
Yeah. We've got some really interesting individual things going on. One thing that's has been proven to be very, very effective over the past 6 to 18 months is the Modern Knowledge Tour here in Canada, and that's done by a couple of friends of mine who've taken on the initiative and made available to a number of cities across Canada the notion of disclosure. And the Modern Knowledge Tour sponsored a 4-city tour, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver, where the Honorable Paul Hellyer, Richard Dolan, Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, there's another person there too. It'll come to me in a minute. Stanton Friedman. We all spoke in different venues, 2 and 3 at a time, right across the country in the month of April and May. And it was an arduous tour, very arduous, but we managed to get through it. And each venue drew well over 350 people, if not more. Calgary was an outstanding venture with almost 400 people there. And we got some coverage on CTV, which was a very good move forward. So that kind of thing is really strong here in Canada, bringing people together to talk about the issue that way. I'm not sure if you're aware of who Grant Cameron is.
I certainly am. Yeah, yes. He's been on the show before. He's been great. He's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, Grant is doing some terrific work, and we know that his stuff on the Rockefeller Files, if you want to talk about it later, is seminal work. Nobody does work like Grant, so that's another option as to how the Canadian field of call it exopolitics if you want, but it's really panning out in a lot of different ways. And so, again, Stanton Friedman, a very strong powerhouse, foundational researcher. And so it's Shag Harbor is another one that could prove to be very, very interesting because, as you may have mentioned at the beginning, it is the only government documented, certified documented UFO incursion on the records in the Canadian government, and that's something that's really important about this case. And I think that Graham Sims is about to make some breakthrough on that. I think he has some major announcements coming up on it.
Oh, that's really exciting. Well, I know Grant made a huge impact. Again, something about 30 years of work with him doing his presidential UFOs, and he was on my show probably right at the beginning in the early part of the year, and he's just exceptional. But I think that now also he's taking a different tack, isn't he? And he's beginning to look at the consciousness side.
Oh,
and,
yes. Yeah,
yeah. It's so exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is. You are up to date. I must congratulate you. That's very good. That's very good. Yes. No, Grant and I bunked a couple of days together, and we got to talk a lot about that whole new perspective that he's sort of showing. And it's not that he's moving away from what he did before, but I think he's realizing that this is not just a political issue. And I think they're looking at raising the level of discussion to the idea that this phenomenon can be recognized, can be certified through the idea of the shared consciousness. And that's one of the things that the experiences are telling us are existent, and that we feel throughout the whole movement that there is this consciousness effort to realize it at almost in a spiritual manner. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but that's that's the kind of tenor this issue has to it. So we're looking at it through a different lens, and anytime we can talk about this issue through a different lens and bring about an awareness, I'm in favor of. So, and I think Grant is really doing a great job in highlighting that as part of this whole phenomenon.
I think what it is as well with people like Grant, he's like you and I, we're doing our little corner, our little bit there, and we're coming together at these sort of node points, if you like, to share. But what I really loved about his awareness was that, I think it was about 3 years ago, he suddenly said, gosh, after all this, I mean, he's done such an amazing amount of work. I mean, 30 years with all the freedom of information stuff and all the rest of that. And I don't know if he can do any more. I don't know if there is more to be done on that. I can't imagine there could be. But after that, where else do you go? And it is the consciousness side, isn't it? But you don't always, the penny doesn't always drop. And I love the way he tells it, because he's got a lot of humility about that. And we're just ordinary people. We're all learning, and that's the thing. We're just all learning. And also then he very much brought to the world another fellow Canadian, Wilbert B. Smith, who I think is perhaps one of the most underrated, unsung heroes of the field in the world, probably, in my opinion. And again, one of those very quiet people who just went about doing their work, had government involvement, and unfortunately the media in that case kind of scuppered the project, but it was working. Yeah, so Wilbert Smith, I think it was early 60s that he left us, but and when he said to his wife, the Russians will come, the Americans will come, who else will come for all his papers and records, make sure they're not here when they come. And sure enough, as Grant interviewed them, that was the story they told. And it doesn't just go to show you, though. And what a pity, because he also had this other technology. And I believe, I can't remember how it came about, but he eventually, agreed that it couldn't be released to humanity. The fact is that we weren't just ready. And oh, what a crying shame. Not that he couldn't do it, that we weren't in that state. Mm-hmm. So, but what an amazing, astonishing soul. So I think it's, we were talking about this 360 business as well. And I think we can't talk anymore about this subject without going to the 360 thing, and that is looking at the health, the wellness, the technology, consciousness, and the lights in the sky, and we've got the metal on the ground, okay, or we may not. We may have We may have interdimensional stuff. So I don't know whether you've had any experiences yourself there, Victor, but maybe you could share with us some of your experiences which have again brought you very deeply involved, apart from the Jacques Vallée material.
Where would I start? I guess I would have to repeat that what I talked about earlier with respect to experiencers and going through what they were going through, or at least helping them go through what they had gone through. And that to me was a very influential part of what I believe and what I understand at a very real and authentic level, because the stories were, in fact, chilling but they had a very strong sense of authenticity. But there was a line of intellectual acuity that was consistent. Everybody was going through the same kind of thing at the same kind of level. The issues were different. There was different kinds of way of expressing it in the situations, but there was this whole strain that I'm being contacted by an intelligence beyond whoever I am, whatever form they may take. And the whole idea of being accessed in that way, as uncomfortable as it is definitely a conduit through we are being selected to experience this phenomenon in a first-hand manner. And that's what I think the experiencer role is. They are, in fact, the frontier people. They are the pioneers here. They're the ones that have actually made contact. They've had the capacity to do it for years and years and years intergenerationally. So that aspect of this whole thing is really an eye-opener as to what contact really means. And if we take the word of the millions upon millions of people who have actually disclosed that they've been taken or influenced in some way, is an admission by a huge number of people on this planet in a very intuitive way that contact has, in fact, Joanne, already been made. And I think that's a key point that we have to understand. Now, that may be too far ahead of the curve for some people. Too hard for them to hear, but I'm sorry, that's the state of the union, folks. So we have to listen to what's going on and be attentive to the many different ways this whole phenomenon comes at us, and the whole experiencer realm is definitely one that shows that contact has, in fact, in my opinion, been made.
Okay,
I don't know if I can be any more distinct about that.
I think what we'll do now, we've got one or two little very tiny short clips of craft and flying objects from Japan and a little trailer. And I think it's your voice on there. So we're going to play those now so you can have a little break. Victor, we've got about 2.5 minutes of those. And I think that's really interesting. So Stephen, when you're ready, we'll play those so people can see these wonderful examples of craft being caught on camera and the little trailer, which I think is great. So we shall play those shortly. And Stephen, just let me know when those are up.
Yeah, give me a few seconds here.
Okay, that's great. I just think it's fascinating that, as you say, Victor, there's so much footage, you don't know what's where sometimes. But
oh, for sure, yes. That's a caution that we always worry about in anything, as Steve brings this whole clip up. The things that happen in these are sometimes so anomalous, and the level of doubt around it is significantly high. So you have to be very circumspect about the ones that you take on as being at least of evidentiary quality. And you're not saying that is in fact an extraterrestrial vehicle, but it demonstrates that there's something going on that's totally anomalous that, in our opinion, has not been hoaxed or faked in any way. Now, that's a very fine line, but the ones that we're going to play, I'm not sure if you can play them once or twice, but they will show you that these things are definitely manifesting in our skies in a very, very unique way, and we don't know what the heck they are or where they're from. So that's part of the whole conundrum. It's just another part of the converging lines of evidence that you have to consider. It in and of itself is not necessarily the answer, but it provides another conduit through which we understand this whole phenomenon.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great.
And you're ready.
Okay, so they're ready to roll. So we'll show folks those. Hope you enjoy these just very short little pieces. So thanks to Victor for providing those as well. So that's great. So we'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes. Hope you enjoy these.
Well, my little program decided to crash.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Are they not playing?
No, it's kind of spinning, waiting to... I may have to restart it again.
Okay.
That
Well,
shouldn't take
yeah,
but a
this
few
is
seconds here.
half of the course. Are you all right there, Victor? Is your doggy okay?
Oh, everything's fine. Everything's great. If you want to get an idea as to what these are like, there's one for sure that you have to watch almost a second time if you can get it up twice, but it's basically a series of 12 objects. That could be one of them, and the
Everything's
other
ready
one
now,
is
Joanne.
a single one, and the one that's a single one is very interesting because it's got a center core orb, and it's moving through the blue sky into the clouds, and it's around it is flapping two other round circles, just a bit smaller, so it looks like a bird flapping their wings, but it's at about 15 or 20,000 feet, and it's obviously a central light with two smaller lights rotating around it very quickly. And then from that craft, as it moves along towards the clouds, you're going to see it eject other orbs in a single orb formation. And that whole incident, if we can bring that up, and if Steve can find it, is really, really worth a close look. And it captivates us to a degree that I really can't tell you. It's absolutely fascinating.
And let's try it
Yeah.
now.
Okay, so maybe Steve, if the player will hold out, we can actually, because there are only a few seconds, we can actually hit that button twice for a replay. That'd be great. We can have a little look at that.
And I can, if you want, as you play it, I can kind of monitor it for you because I've seen it so many times. I know exactly what's going to happen.
I'm not sure which one we've got going up first.
I'm going. Oh, it's totally crashed. No, it's not
Oh my
going to work.
goodness.
It's not going to work for some reason.
Is it?
No.
Can I play it from my side or
Well,
not really?
I'd have to set it all up again if you want to try it again.
Okay. Well,
Go ahead and
tell you-
continue talking, though.
Sorry?
Go ahead and keep talking.
All right. So will you just give us a little shout and hopefully we will get those to play.
Yes.
Victor, I'm not sure what year they were taken. Are they fairly recent? Those images.
The one over Fukushima was just after the Fukushima incident. Was it 2010, 2011?
Yeah.
And the other one from China, there's no date on it, but it has to be relatively recent because of the technology that the kind of camera it was. So we're probably looking at 2014, 2015. It's relatively new.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's hope we can.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that we can see that. I just think again, it's nice when you have this kind of material to share. It just brings another aspect into the talk. So, Stephen, just let me know if you think that's going to come up or not. If not, then we will continue with something else too.
I'll be able to get it up. I just have to do it a different way.
All right. Okay. So maybe let's just maybe we can talk about perhaps some of the people that you've been engaging with, Victor, that you've been sharing platforms with as well, who have you've been helping move this whole subject along whilst we're waiting to get the video.
One of the most consequential right now. I'm not sure if you want to talk about it now or later, but I think that we need to definitely make this publicly known to your audience that the Vatican has officially become involved in dialogue about the extraterrestrial issue. Now, that's a very large statement to make, but one I think that will prove itself to be historical, because what has happened is the director of the Vatican Observatory, Father Jose Gabriel Funes, has agreed to come over to the United States to be part of an investigative body to look at an open dialogue at the University of Berkeley in California, or the University of California in Berkeley, to examine this issue with a panel of experts from all over the planet. And the New Paradigm Institute, established by Watergate lawyer, by the way, Daniel Sheehan,
Oh, yes.
Daniel is instrumental in putting this all together, and he went over to meet with Father Funes to ask him if he would so graciously take a sabbatical leave to come over to the United States and become part of this Vatican dialogue that they're going to create with an array of experts, from scientists, physicists, researchers like Grant Camerons of the world, or the Steve Bassett of the world. All of the other experts are involved in this. Even scientists who don't recognize the phenomenon is going on at all, but bringing them together to talk about this whole thing. So they're going to be vetting all these speakers over the next 6 months, and then Father Funes will take over and chair the committees to begin assembling questions in a very public way, I might add. Daniel has made it clear that he will be meeting on at least once a month publicly on webinars to explain the progress of these investigations once they begin. So it is a seminal kind of adventure that is going to be, I think, global in implications eventually once the Vatican realizes, if they don't already, and we feel that they do, advance the idea that not only is it possible that extraterrestrials exist and that they are brothers, as they stated before, that's not enough. I think the Church has to come forward and take the next step. And I think under Pope Francis, the possibilities are very, very, very real.
Well, let's see if we can play these videos, but we'll come back to that as well, Victor, because that is absolutely groundbreaking if we've got that going ahead. So, Stephen, you just tell me how we're doing with that, and let's see. Get the end of them there, Stephen?
Yes, you're back on.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I can't see, folks. I'm kind of deaf and blind to what's playing out there until it suddenly cuts off. So anyways, that just gives you again a little bit of a view, an overview, and also that was a trailer that Victor had done for something before. So you can tell us a little bit more about that, Victor.
The trailer itself?
Yeah.
Or the UFO sighting?
Yeah, we'll go through a few, both.
Both. Okay, well, the trailer basically was part of a podcast that we, in an effort to really bring this forward at Chorus Radio, which is the second largest entertainment group, and they've accepted the whole idea of the podcasts being sort of a central focus, much like what you're doing. But what they're doing, they're branching it out through the audience within Canada. And the show is called The Producers, and two very delightful young fellows who really want to find out what's going on. I did an interview with them, and that was one of the trailers that they played to introduce me on that particular program. And I told them that I said I don't want to just talk about lights in the sky. I want to be very frank with the audience as to what this is all really about. And at the time, we were doing a lot of work in the area of secrecy and whether or not governments have the right to keep secrets. And as you may have heard in the clip, that I do say that constitutionally, governments have the right to keep secrets. That's something that we totally admit and understand and have to agree to because it's part of the Constitution. However, in doing that, you also have to look at the fact that constitutionally that is okay, but to keep secrets. But that talks not at all to the issue of not lying to their people. Okay, they've never been given the right to lie. That's the essence. They can fudge the truth if they want, but they can't outright lie. And essentially, with the UFO issue, that's what they're doing. So that's the point that we tried to make, is that constitutionally what they're doing is wrong. So on a moral basis, ethically speaking, that we have a right to demand answers from our government. Now, what kind of answers we get is another question. Will it be those incisive statements about, yes, everything's as you suspect it is, or if there's another spin to it? So we have to be very circumspect about, first of all, what kind of information we get from the government and how to be suspicious about it in terms of what they actually admit. That's where this whole idea, Joanne, comes in, where we talked about it earlier with the consciousness level. Yeah. People are beginning to believe this at another level. So it's almost like the political is being left behind because we already know that they know. So why continue to rag the puck, as we say in Canada? We can't delay any longer. And I think that whole consciousness movement is going in that direction. So that's how we really kind of put this thing forward. That the governments could be an irrelevant factor in all of this. It could be.
Do you think, Victor, from what you've found over the last 30 years and your associates over there, that the benevolent ETs are supporting or moving things ahead in any, collaborative way or otherwise? What's your take on that?
Well, that's a really touchy issue.
It is.
In a lot of ways, and I would think that if in fact whoever these ETs are putting themselves forward in such an enigmatic way. The big problem I have, and I think I'll have to talk to them about this once we actually get to make contact. I would want to ask the question: why are you being so elusive about this, or why were you being so elusive about your presence? What's the idea behind this whole cloak and dagger thing? And I think the extraterrestrials have an answer to that question. Now, how legitimate it is depends on, I guess, the perspective of what's really going on. But they are definitely delaying things, or at least guiding things through a maze that's leading in a direction. And I don't think that they're necessarily going to give us all the answers. We've got to get through the maze ourselves. And I think that's what they're hoping that we can do, that we can put all things together as a species. And I think that's maybe what they really are looking for, is that to recognize that this is not just something that's governmental or religious or whatever it is. It has a whole universal appeal, global appeal to it, and everyone on the planet understands that there are other intelligences out there, and that's going to take a lot of work. That will take a heck of a lot of work.
It is, and I'm just wondering, because there are people who believe that there are benevolence on and off planet, perhaps.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes working, but then not allowed with that prime directive to interfere. But maybe, as James Gilliland said, maybe part of our issues are because exactly of some of their involvement in the past, and they need to give us a bit of support down here. Do you think that's relevant, or do you go with any of that, or do you think it's just us down here, really with our shoulder to the wheel?
It's once again, I'm not going to deny that there may be some influence. It's a matter of understanding what level the influence is at, and I would probably start with the contactees again in terms of influence. That is something that's moving along in a way that we didn't anticipate, and so that's one arm of their influence. The other possible level of influence could be at a governmental or non-governmental level over the years. Now, how that's dissipated or how it's continued, I really don't know. But behind the scenes, way back when, I definitely think the government knew about what was going on, and they were engaging extraterrestrials as visitors back then in a really kind of panicky way. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where these things were from. And so I think that their contact that might have occurred, that's reported to have occurred, really has an influence on what we believe today. So I think the acceptance that there has been some contact, if I was a betting man, I would say yes. In terms of influence long term, I would also say yes. But at what level and how subtle, only disclosure is going to really answer those kinds of questions, because it's just something that's not something that is prevalent. For some reason, we are in the dark. We are remaining in the dark, and there must be some sort of answer to that kind of question as to why.
If we go back to the Vatican initiative, or is it a Vatican initiative? Is it somebody else's initiative and the Vatican are coming on board with this, with Father Funes taking part in this? Is this going to be something that is going to be unrolled in the next sort of few days, weeks, or a year? Well,
it's a good question again. It's going to take them about. First of all, it's not something separate from the Vatican. What has happened is Daniel Sheehan, the lawyer who's involved in this, who's propelling this whole idea, used to be the head Jesuit counselor for the North American Jesuit Order. So he was their head counsel for a number of years as their solicitor. So he knows the Jesuit Order very, very well. And he's appealing to the Jesuits now through Father Funes, who is a Jesuit, and consequently, Pope Francis is a Jesuit. They've made inroads in that way to open up a dialogue. So Daniel Sheehan is inviting the Vatican Observatory director over to head up this whole huge dialogue. So it's sort of a hand-in-glove kind of thing. I wouldn't say either one of them led. I would say the Vatican Church probably did initially, because of Funes' statements way back when. I think in 2009, he began to talk about extraterrestrials as our brothers, and if they have a right to baptism, and all of that other kind of rhetoric. But the admission of that was a strong sort of denial of what the church has said before. So that's very key in this. The Vatican's moving ahead very, very, very slowly. And Funes is part of that movement. And whether he's a conduit for it or not, or a leader in it, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that this initiative is coming out of the Vatican directly. He has the sanction of I guess, the upper level officials to move forward and be part of this initiative. So it is a process. I think it'll be a good year to year and a half before we hear any news.
Right. So it's sort of, has it already sort of convened, Victor? That's what I was kind of getting as well.
No, not yet. No.
Not,
Danny is right. I spoke with Danny the other day, and Danny is in the middle of inviting. He's drawing up an invitation list of all of these experts, and they're going to begin the vetting process at Berkeley, California, for the next from just, I think it's January to September. They're going to be vetting all these people. That's the first part of the process, and then once that vetting takes place, and they develop a committee. The size, who knows? That's when Father Funes will chair that committee to begin the proceedings as to how they will set the parameters for discussion and what the issues are on the agenda about talking overtly about contact, not just about the possibilities of extraterrestrial existence, but the fact that we have indeed been contacted. The Church is ready to listen to arguments about that, and that's an absolutely massive move forward in the whole disclosure, but it's going to be painfully slow. I should add, by the way, Daniel is holding, along with ET Let's Talk, that's ET Let's Talk, is holding monthly webinars to get updates of the information. So Danny wants to be transparent in his efforts here to let people know exactly what's going on. He'll be giving monthly reports. So if you're interested in that, maybe contact me or whatever, because it could be an extremely important way of finding out what's going on during the process rather than waiting for something to happen down the end of the line.
Does this have any political orientation as well? Are there going to be any senators or any other folks like that from the political scene involved?
To my understanding, Joanne, they're appealing to people of science. They may get or invite or at least involve possibly media representatives to do some coverage of it. But my understanding is that it's sort of a non-partisan, non-political. As soon as you start inviting, political people, you get all different kinds of perspectives that they're not open to, because the political realm has had their chance and they blew it. Let's put it that way, okay? They blew it big time. So now it's time for academics to take over, and I think that's what Danny wants to do, is have some academics involve themselves in discussion about this, and realistically looking at the data and looking at all the things that we're talking about, not just one specific avenue of it, all these converging lines of evidence. And I think Danny wants to stay away from the political.
Okay, well, we had Monsignor Balducci. I'm trying to think when he passed, but certainly 2006, 7, and I think 8 he was still around. And again, he was giving interviews. I think Paola Harris and quite a lot of other people interviewed him. And I know I certainly replayed some of his subtitle pieces talking about ET. So it's not new news for the Vatican, but the fact that they're going out in this way. And also if it's true that Father, I think it was McIntyre, was at that 1954 Treaty of Greada event, when supposedly, an agreement was made between humans and the ETs. And, because that's the reason we even got to know about it, isn't it? Apparently, because Father McIntyre talked about it. So, maybe he was a little bit a part of the disclosure.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? But we've had Monsignor Balducci, who was very vocal about it. Toward the end of his life. So he set a great precedent, I must say. So I really do hope that Father Funes continues that. And it will be interesting to see also if they take in any of the observatory information. I know that the Vatican are wildly interested in the, observing the heavens, and have got, fingers in lots of pies in that direction. So I hope that, it will be all encompassing and that we can get some feedback from what they're seeing with that, whether we will or not. Maybe that's a whole nother thing.
Well, it's quite clear that they own and operate 7 observatories.
7. Oh, it's
7.
7. Yeah, I didn't realize
Yes.
it's so
Not
many.
just Gandolfo. There are 6
Yeah.
other, one in Arizona, and I don't know where the others are, but they operate 7 observatories. So
You've got to ask why, hey?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it really is something. When it all comes out, it'll be really interesting to see, because as far back as when I did the radio initially, Joanne, way, way, way back, and I'm talking probably the late 70s and early 80s, and I don't want to sound like an old cow at this, but or whatever, but the fact of the matter was, I was very well tuned into the fact that the Catholic Church was aware, or at least had information about this. And it was sort of an intuitive sense, and I found out through artwork, as a matter of fact, how the church understood or interpreted the news about this in its own way, knowing full well what was going on. But being wise to the times, they chose to put it forward in a way that was palatable for the culture at the time. And that's how we move forward without any real sort of acquisition of the truth, or at least the authenticity of it, from the Catholic Church. They stayed away from it. But now they're moving closer to it and realizing that it's something that is endemic to the human species and that it needs to be talked about. They can no longer. And the really interesting point about this, Joanne, is the Catholic Church does not want to be in a position that it was during the Galileo and Copernicus era, where they had to admit they were wrong. And they lost credibility big time because of that. They had to completely revise their doctrine about the place of the universe, rather the earth in the universe. They had to completely revise it. And they don't want to be in that same position now, again, being behind the times. So I think this is an effort, as quiet as it might be, to allow that effort to be ahead of the curve. And I think that's something that we anticipate. We don't want to necessarily build up too many expectations, let this thing play out the way it should. But we're hopeful that this dialogue, the beginning of this dialogue, will indeed allow us to recognize it at that level, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, is there going to be maybe somebody like Dr. Lana Marconi or whoever allowed into film any of the proceedings? Do you know?
A very good question. Knowing Danny the way I do, and being an organizer, he is definitely going to want to bring every method at his disposal to bring about that kind of I guess context to the whole talks. Now, whether or not that's something that eventually occurs down the line, or once the group meets and finds out its parameters, gets its sea legs, so to speak, whether they're going to be doing presentations in a documented way, or is it just going to be ordinary discussions to begin with, and then moving on to some sort of filming of the statements. Who knows? Maybe it'll be similar to the NASA one, but with a whole lot more smarter people. It could be the same sort of thing. Hopefully they profit in that way, and it's professional, it's well done, and it's academically sound. So I think it's really important for them to set their parameters before they start putting it all before the cameras. That will come in time, I know, but not initially.
Where do they see this? What is the ultimate goal of this? I know that we'll have discussion and research and review by these folks sort of down the line, if we've now come to that point and we've got this information with these prestigious academically orientated people. What do you think is going to come from it after that, Victor? Or perhaps you know.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think I've got a good answer for it, believe it or not. It may not be the answer, but it's what I surmise might happen as a result of this. Do you remember earlier in the conversation when I talked about, or you alluded to the fact that we had the benevolent ETs moving things forward and waiting for the decision to be made to disclose, et cetera, but there's also this aspect of, are we ready for this globally? Well, to what degree will the human consciousness have to have this understanding embedded in its worldview? What percentage? Half of us? 80%? Does it have to be a full 100% of humanity understanding this? At what level will the extraterrestrials see that we've come to the threshold of making the next step, and then they may be ready? That could be as soon as tomorrow, or it could be 10 years. But I think it's a matter of them waiting to understand that we really see this as a very serious issues. And things like this, the cyclical war cycle that we're in. We are in a cycle of cyclical war economy in every way, shape, and form. We have to have wars in order to sustain us. Okay, we have to dig metal up from the ground, form it into shapes of little pellets, and stick them in one another. You know, and bomb one another. I mean, these are what I call extinction behaviors, Joanne. These are the kinds of yeah, these are the kinds of things that make us become extinct, and that's where we're headed if we don't listen to what the hell's going on. And we have to somehow extinguish those behaviors, or at least put them behind us. And that's going to take a global reality for a majority of the people on the planet to understand before we move forward. And that the fact that we're in a cyclical war economy, there's crisis all over the planet, and increasingly, once we can settle that down and show whoever these ETs are that we are serious about understanding the message, then maybe we can move forward with this. But if you look at the current state of affairs, you know, you can't blame somebody for being not hopeful. It's not a good sign.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I was just wondering, you know, what form their disclosure about what they have found, their review process had brought, and whether that would be given formally, you know, in a conference style, or whether it would be presented to the political leaders of the world, or religious, or all leaders of the world in their different guises.
Yeah, well, that I think is part of that process. I know you're talking about Daniel P. Sheehan, who was a Watergate lawyer, as I mentioned already.
Yeah,
he's also
crazy
responsible
guy.
for bringing forward the Pentagon Papers. So he knows how to frame in a litigious way, in a legal way. He knows how to put this thing together so that whatever legitimacy does come from it is framed in a very, very secure jurisprudential manner. In other words, that it'll be you know, succinct information at a level of legal tenure. He could make it a legal document. So these kinds of things could become legal and binding under citizen initiatives. So it's something that the government, I think, will have to kind of look at as being a reality. But once the Catholic Church, and here's the flip side of that coin, once the Catholic Church allows this process to occur, the conduit of government becomes almost meaningless or redundant. And once the Catholic Church can make an assurance that we are being, in fact, visited by off-world civilizations, once it makes that public, Joanne, that will change it'll almost reverse the spin of the planet, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, you're so right. My goodness,
Now,
can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, that is absolutely the most stupendous expectation that you could ever have. However, we are I think, on the threshold of that. And how that becomes made public, it's a very good question. I think as Danny goes along, he will decide how this thing unfolds, but I think he's got to get the people talking first and allowing them to kind of meet the common ground that they need to meet upon in order to move forward and to say, okay, what are we going to do next? What's this going to look like you say, what's this going to look like at the end of this whole process? Where do we want to go with this? Are we going to go down the avenue of secrecy, or at least being tentative about our decisions, or are we going to move forward with the truth? I mean, they've got to decide what fork in the road they're going to take. And I sense if Danny's involved with it, I know what fork that will be. So, and how he's going to tell the world about it. And I do emphasize that he's having direct webinars once a month on what's going on. So he's got that kind of conduit of openness to make reports publicly as to what the committee is talking about once they get going. So it's an evolutionary thing, but I think all good things.
I think it's you know, whatever anybody thinks of religion or whatever, you know, the fact is that the Pope is still a relevant body that a lot of people pay attention to. So you know, at least 1 billion or so. So it will be an astonishing event if within, you know, a year, well, perhaps 18 months or maybe 2 years, I don't know how long something will take like that we get something of great value, and not a Royal Society event where you have these fabulous sounding people with all these titles and these wonderful remarks, but actually it's all just like so much hot air, and we don't need that. As you said before, that humanity is really on the verge of the next step of evolution, and I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that maybe being funneled through the experiencer, the contactee, with their at the coalface information coming through, whether there's going to be something down that road, or whether the exopolitics side will, or a synthesis perhaps, will draw this forward. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the both are leading in the same direction, but I think they're leading in the directions that they're going in because of a different foundation of knowledge. The exopolitical side is looking at the phenomenon from a relatively objective point of view in terms of within the whole framework, without the sort of the anchor of philosophical issues as to whether it's true or not. You know, they try not to look at that. They sort of, that's a given from that point of view, and that's why they go forward in the way they do. But the synthesis is that the experiencers are getting that same sort of information, but directly, so they know that it's true. I mean, they've had it confirmed to them. There's no doubt about it at all. So a lot of the political organizations that are exopolitical and leaning now is coming to the understanding that the abduction phenomenon, it could be the leading pathway to an understanding as to what this issue is really all about, rather than some form of overt government disclosure. And hopefully the dialogue in the Vatican that's coming up to introduce the idea of abductions into that kind of framework would be absolutely revolutionary. It boggles my mind to have that discussed in the same room as Vatican officials, you know, and have them respond to questions and ask questions and look for answers rather than denying. Do you see where I'm going with that? You know?
Yeah, I do.
You know, whether or not they can accept it or reject it, but the fact of the matter that it will be expressed and it will be brought to the Vatican's attention if they don't already know. That's a very good caveat. They may know all about this.
I'm sure they know quite a lot. I mean,
of course, yes.
Have the kind of the Fatima disclosures. I mean, there's been so many things that they've had, you know, awareness and knowledge of. And someone was telling me that just only in 1994 were another, I don't know, it was 80 pages of documents by Nostradamus quatrains were found. And believe it or believe it not, in one of them, it mentions a UFO. And and it sounds ridiculous to say, but you know, the Vatican has had those documents and many, many others. So it's quite interesting. It really is intriguing. So and it's not about the religious thing. It is about the influence that it has
absolutely
on the planet at the time.
Yeah, this should not be looked at, and I think we need to. Once it comes out, we have to deal with this issue, and you've raised it, so I might as well address it, of to whether or not this is a religious initiative. On one hand, I guess it is. You know, it's the Catholic Church and you know the Vatican as a political entity realizing that it has to move into the 21st century. Okay, well into the 21st century, I might add. That's the first thing that they'll have to sort of admit, and then from that, there's the understanding that whatever comes of this is going to be something that's of an esoteric value, not a religious value. It's not going to be a pronouncement as to whether or not there's a God or who Jesus Christ was or any of those issues at all. All they will be interested in is getting at the fact that we are being engaged, the government knows that we're being engaged, and the Vatican understands the same thing too. As a matter of fact, Joanne, this could happen, and that we go back to the Vatican with our questions or answers, and the Vatican could well say, tell me something that we don't know.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, they may think your talks are great, but they're probably redundant because we know so much more. You know, we're not getting any, I don't think we're getting any insiders in this sort of whole conversation. So that's another thing that needs to unfold about this, is that the idea of the church being an unchangeable, totally mobile entity, you know, that just sort of structured so dead in concrete. A friend of mine says that the church changes its mind every 200 years. Well, it's on the brink of that right now. It's going to have to change its mind, whether it likes it or not, and the facts will speak to it. So, from that point of view, it's not really about religion. It's about the practicality of human thought, and like I said before, being on the next step of our evolution, and them admitting that that's where we are.
Yeah. Just wanted to sort of touch base. I know it's not going to be a political element to it, but just to talk about perhaps John Podesta, simply because he's the one person who seems to have hit the headlines with at least, I don't know whether it's 4 or 5 references to ET. What's your take on John Podesta and,
Well,
if anything, and what does
I've been following that. Zealand Communications has done at least 3 separate, no, 4 now, I think, separate press releases on the activities of John Podesta. And I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with it. John Podesta was the chief of staff under Bill Clinton. From I believe it was 1996 through to about 98 or something like that, or maybe even further than that. But he was the chief of staff in the White House while Bill Clinton was president. So he saw all the stuff that was going on in the White House with the Clintons around the UFO ET secrecy issue. He was there when Lawrence Rockefeller filed his letters through Dr. Jack Gibbons to the president's science advisor, trying to get Clinton to admit, or at least discuss, the fact that the government was holding back on this issue. And a series of, that I know of, 53 letters went back and forth. So that kind of initiative is really important from the point of view that he saw everything while he was in the White House. So after he retired, he took up a position for the for another corporation. In any case, as a solicitor, that dealt with secrecy, by the way. What he did then was he teamed up with author and Boston Globe journalist Leslie Kean. I don't know if your audience is familiar with Leslie, but she wrote the book UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and so go on the record. A fantastic book. That's an absolute must-read. So he linked up with her and found out that she was in a position through the CFI, the Center for Freedom of Information, to hold press releases and press conferences at the National Press Club. And they did hold one. At that press club announcement in Washington, D.C., before a huge audience, by the way, it's on YouTube, John Podesta went on record at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., as challenging the government to come forward with issues that were still remained in the dark about UFOs. He made that pronouncement and question demand twice, once in 2001, I believe, and I think again in 2002, virtue of the same kind of announcement. So, if you go on to read the entire text of his testimony, it's absolutely essential that we understand that this man knows what's going on, or at least knows a little bit about what's going on, or at least knows a little about the secrecy hinges that are keeping this thing intact. So I think that he's a very powerful player in that, and I think he did something on Twitter. He made the announcement on Twitter that one of his biggest failures while he was in the White House, he admitted this freely to a journalist, one of the biggest failures that he did not achieve, things that did not achieve, was the disclosure of this whole UFO issue. He regrets that sincerely, and he said that. Now, whether that was a political play or just, a beckoning for tears or sorrow or empathy, I don't know. But a man like this, a man of this political background, does not make statements like that. It's not in his interest whatsoever to talk in that way. So you have to wonder why he's making pronouncements on that side of the coin. But on the other side of the coin, he's playing the political game with Hillary Clinton. He is now her campaign manager. So you have a sense of where that's going. So he's playing both sides of the street, like any good politician does. But what side of the street is he going to land up with when the fork in the road comes? He's going to have to understand that he's going to have to take a position publicly on this, and that's what I'm hoping that he'll do very, very soon with the Clinton campaign.
Do you imagine that if Hillary got in, she would be disclosing anything? Do you think?
Well,
I mean, I know she knows about the UFO stuff. It's obvious that she does.
Yeah, for sure. That whole argument's running rampant in the exopolitical community, and there's a group of people that said there's no way she's going to come forward on this, because if she does, she will automatically be eliminated from any kind of consideration as a presidential candidate. However, she has a body of information behind her that she has to sort of weigh in terms of rolling the dice. If she figures she's got the whole goods on this, which she just might have, Clinton may have more information about this than we realize. I'm talking about her husband, or at least the conduits through which you can find out where this information resides, because he freely admitted He talked to one of the White House journalists at a press conference. I forget her first. McClellan was her last name. And in any case, he admitted to her that there's a government beyond the government. I don't control the government, and he made it very clear at that White House press conference. So when a president says something like that, you know that there's something cooking. So I don't know. It's a very, very touchy subject as to whether or not she's going to come forward. She has a lot to lose by doing it, but she has a lot to gain by coming out and once again speaking the truth, or at least alluding to the truth. Even if she does that, that will be a major step forward. But there's a whole lot of political considerations that come before that, I think, for her.
Is there going to be any campaigning from your side, do you think, to Justin Trudeau?
Well,
do you think there's any mileage there?
Well, I spoke to a group in France 2 weekends ago, and one of the things that I plan to do in Zealand Communications, and I know that I've got the cooperation of at least 2 other groups to move forward on putting together a dossier for the Minister of Defense and for the Prime Minister. And that's something that we're going to be looking at in the very, very near future, because we already have a lot of information that I have already sent to previous ministers of defense and prime ministers, by the way. But we want to make a concerted effort to do this, and maybe the opportunity is right for a government that's sort of alluding to more openness and listening to the people. So we'll just see the kinds of things that we can draw up. So we're looking at not a petition necessarily, but a report. A good, bold, academically well-written report to the Ministry of Defense, looking at all the data, the NORAD documents for one thing. That's a good opening for us. It's a perfect opening, and then from that, all of the other evidence with astronauts and the testimony at the witnesses' hearings in Washington in 2013 and in 2001. All those kinds of things to bring them up to speed, so that it makes it okay for them to talk about it too. So that's something that we look forward to, and it could be very well related to this whole Vatican issue too. So we could tie that in and say, well, if the Vatican's talking about this, why isn't the Canadian government doing more to investigate it all? So that's a very serious consideration on our part.
Well, maybe that's something that each of the different countries could actually engage in and come together. And I'm put in mind of that because Susan Hansen from New Zealand, New Zealand UFO Research, who's going to be a guest on my show soon, has also got an agreement going with the Chilean folks. And most of the Chilean UFO research people are in fact military of one kind or another. And so they have, again, a different take and orientation. And I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. And you know, maybe quite seriously, that is, you know, a wonderful way to start hooking up with, you know, the different countries, perhaps with one leading, like a chair, pulling it together, helping to, you know, correlate things from each of the countries. Because I've spoken about this guy before, but I met a guy called Eamon Ansborough, who's an Irish astronomer. And I met him in 2009 at a talk that I was giving in Ireland with Betty Myler. On the UFO thing, and he took 1 or 2 of us. In fact, Grant was there as well. I think that's where I met Grant the first time. And he showed us devices he was using, a camera setup to track UFOs that were coming into a part of Ireland in Boyle. And then he was feeding this back to ESA, to the the European Space Agency. Now, he's not coming forward with any other information, and he's not, you know, willing to communicate, it seems, but otherwise. But, you know, clearly they are having this information. You know, when you've got people like as well, Robert O'Dean, talking about, you know, the assessment and that, and maybe it's time for another assessment, except maybe this is by the people. Maybe that's something to think about.
Well, I think you're making some very good points about the need to coalesce and to bring the whole discussion together in some way, shape, or form. And you mentioned Chile, and Argentina is another major player. They both have a very active UFO community. And the difference between, specifically that I know in Argentina, the difference between the levels of cooperation up from here to down there is that the Argentine government, its Air Force specifically, has a very good working relationship with the UFO community down there. There is a connection, an ongoing connection between those two groups. So they're not sort of in sync completely, but they do have communication with one, and that's a unique situation.
It
So
is a unique situation.
Yeah.
I was really impressed. You know, I didn't know that, and I look forward to hearing, you know, more about that as well. But it's just sort of coming to mind that maybe this is something that we could all begin working, you know, on and contributing to, because, you know, if there's 6, 10, 12 countries all pulling together, you know, creating a document that all the governments need to be aware of, well, you know, it's by the people for the people, isn't it? And
that's right.
that may, along with the I don't know whether to call it the religious initiative, the Vatican, well, Daniel Sheen's initiative, that's what it is. It's a potentially legal scenario going on there, that could be really exciting. And I'm also hoping to get, I know there's Neil Gould out there in Hong Kong, but I'm hoping to speak to him at some point as well. And somebody who'd been a speaker at my conference, his name just escapes me at the moment, a professor actually at one of the universities over here. He's a Korean, South Korean, and he's now back in South Korea, but he's also interviewing Japanese and Korean experiencers and researchers. And that's really exciting because he's going to be bringing some of that research back. And he's been working with Don Dairy, actually, which is fantastic. Do you know Don Dairy?
Of course, yes, I do.
Canada?
Yes, yeah, very well. Yep. From McGill
So-
University, yes. Very astute observations, and his stuff is well worth reading. He knows his stuff for sure.
I have his book. I've yet to get through that. But that's the sort of thing as well with the science. And maybe I don't know if you are aware of Ray Hernandez and FREE, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. Again, with like Dr. Rudy Shield and Ray Steiner, trying to bring science to bear on all of that. And, you know, they've done a prodigious amount of work, I think, already on things like surveys with experiences, that kind of thing. But maybe that's also something that they could turn their light on too, is also doing, you know, something along the lines of what Daniel's doing, except in a smaller way, but bringing it then to the different countries to try and bring some cohesion to a document or two.
Yeah, I think that there is a role here for the United Nations, believe it or not, as strange as that might seem for some people to admit that the United Nations is good for anything. I mean, being facetious, but it is a world body, and it does have a certain level of credibility. Now, I think that, once again, it's not something that we're going cap in hand to these political organizations to say,
Oh, no.
tell us what you know. That's not the sort of the motivation here. It's the other way around, is us telling them what reality is all about, and that we want a free expression of it within the democratic, I guess, principles that you stand for in terms of open communication. The United Nations needs to access the information about this properly and express it properly in an open format. So that could be the next step in this whole thing in terms of the organizations that you're talking about. If a group of these organizations could coalesce and develop a UN proposal and accept it, because they already have a tenet within, I think it's Article, you know, don't quote me on the article, I think it's 351, it's Section 351, that talks about the United Nations demanding, I think it actually uses the word demand or a synonym of it, that nations come forward to tell the UN about UFO sightings, something of that nature. There's a conduit there through which countries can report UFO sightings to the United Nations, and that they have to act upon it in some way. So there is a provision there. So there's that conduit too, that if these people that you're alluding to want to coalesce and develop a document of some kind to get it on the agenda of the United Nations, and possibly other organizations, maybe Greenpeace should start talking about this. Some of the environmental organizations need to start talking about this. Some of the climatological organizations, because it affects everything.
It certainly does. Yeah,
it does, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we can, you know, a natural conduit into this whole issue, once again, Joanne, is the energy issue. And looking
Absolutely.
at
My favorite.
that's the deal breaker right there. That is the deal breaker.
Yeah, can you imagine? I mean, I'm really not sure what this would look like, but I think it'd be fantastic to get representatives around the table with people like yourself there and other people who are on point for, moving this stuff forward and have a lot of information quickly into hand, having done years of research, to move this into a format which would be sensible for people. What I mean is sensible, I mean understandable, accessible as well.
Of course, yeah.
And also, it's the media. The media is so controlled, it's never going to get out there. So if we go in the back door through this other route, I mean, we might just stand a chance. Who knows?
That's where I have a glimmer of hope about what I'm doing personally and with the people that I know that are working in the media, to find that crack in the glass ceiling. And once that happens, that we find the crack, we won't break through it the first time. But I sense that there is a point at which some of the major media, because of the critical mass of this information, its need to just explode, and the inevitability of it in fact exploding, that one of the major media, sooner or later, if they're sharp enough, are going to deal with it head on. And I think it's like the Catholic Church, once again, not being behind the 8 ball. They're not going to be playing a passive role here. If we can find a media organization that's willing to take the risk, much like the Washington Post did with Watergate. I mean, they had a lot to lose, but they went forward. Those journalists got the okay to move forward. They were ridiculed, they were threatened, but the truth came out, or at least something that approximated the truth. Now, if that same kind of thing, this cosmic Watergate, can happen again with this issue, if a newspaper or a news organization of some repute can get a hold of this thing and make sense of it, so that they can put it forward in public in an acceptable manner, not just as part of regular news. This does not have anything to do with young females wanting to look like Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with that. We have to understand that kind of information is outdated, and irrelevant. And once again, I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but the fact is true. Many people, young people, admit this, that the information they're being fed is virtually garbage. And they're taught to be consumers, and that's all there is to life. Consume, consume, take pictures of yourself, and don't care about anything else.
I know, it's nuts.
Especially the fate of your species. Forget about it. We'll take care of it for you. I mean, that's what the message is. So they're not paying attention. So as a result, I've always believed that the human race is a huge slap in the face to wake up. And we need to grow up to understand what's going on with this issue. And if we don't do it soon enough, someone else is going to make the decision for us, and it may not be as palatable as what we hope it might be, in terms of us being forced into the understanding one way or another.
Well, I really put forward that we should all be having a ministers for extraterrestrial affairs in our governments.
Yes,
I really do. Someone did an interview with me, and they said, "What would you like to see?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd like to be the Minister for Extraterrestrial Affairs." And I said, "I'm serious." I said,
you know what? You've just given me an idea.
Yeah.
Terrific. It's a great, there has to be a point in time where there's going to be some government individual, and if it's at the ministerial level, my goodness, what a stretch forward that would be. My goodness.
Yeah. Why not? Why not? Well, Victor, I have to thank you very much for a really interesting discussion. Thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing things Canadian-wise. And again, thanks everybody for listening. And just as if you can just shout out your contact details again, Victor, they will be on the podcast page, folks, so you can catch up with Victor's news there if you want.
Well, first of all, my email address is zland, that's ZLAND, @simpatico.ca. And if you just want to reach the Zealand Communication News Network, all you have to do is just throw it into your browser, just throw in Zealand Communications, and you'll come up with 2 websites. One is our sort of web page where we make announcements and so on and so forth and keep people current. And the other one is the blog, is the news blog. And it's also at the same location too. And that's where we do all of our press releases. So if you just Google Zealand Communications, you'll get to both of those pages. And I want to thank you very much for sharing the time with me. And I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I really look forward to hearing again anything else that comes out of the resonance and any developments from there. And also, I'll be sure to look up the Zealand news. And thank you for doing all the work. It is fantastic. People like you and Grant, it is a prodigious amount of work. whatever people's take on it, whether they agree or don't agree, this is a job. So thank you very much for being part of that, because it really is fantastic. And people like me get my information from people like you and Grant and all the rest of it, as well as doing my own research, which is, we're all just sharing that. So thank you very much. It's absolutely wonderful. And I look forward to another chat. VICTOR VIGGIANI of Zealand Communications News Network. Thank you very much. And Stephen, thank you so much as well. Thank you everybody for listening in. And when we're ready, Stephen, it is now 1 o'clock, 1 a.m. and we are on the 9th. So thank you very much, folks. This is the Ammach Files. We are over and out. Till next week.
Ammach Files.
I would imagine by now, who's listening to your program is familiar with Mr. Hellier's situation. So I really won't go into currently what's going on, because most of your listeners and viewers probably know about it. In any case, there are not too many people know how it came about, and I'll try to make a Reader's Digest version for you. Essentially, I was working at a radio station, CFRB, here in Toronto, and at the time we were doing a show called Strange Days Indeed, and the host there was Errol Bruce Knapp. And we had finished one evening back in one Sunday or Saturday night in April of 2005. And essentially what happened, the show came to an end and we had guests on, et cetera, et cetera. And then the phone rang in the CFRB studios and it said, there's a call for you in line 1, Victor. I said, well, yeah, we're just finished. I really don't want to talk to anyone. So I picked up the phone. I said, yeah, I'll take it. So it turned out that this fellow who knew Paul Hellyer way back then, and even before, he was his campaign manager during some elections. So he knew Paul very, very, very well, and he's also part of his own Bible study group. So he said to me, Victor, you need to talk to Paul Hellyer. And at the time, I remembered Paul as a politician, but I had never associated him with the UFO issue, and neither was he at the time. So it came out to me, anyways, completely out of the blue. So I just said, well, I'll call him, fine, thank you. I'm not sure why I'm going to call him, but I'll call him. So a couple of days went by, and I did that, and consequently, I got him on the phone, and I said, Mr. Hellyer, I got your name from Jim, so-and-so. He said, oh, yes, I know Jim quite well. I said, I understand that you're reading a book called The Day After Roswell by Philip J. Corso. And he said, yes. And I said, well, coincidentally, we are planning a symposium this coming September about the UFO disclosure issue. And because you're reading this book, might you be open to being our keynote speaker, since you have an interest in this? He said, oh, no, I could never do that. So the first request was denied because he had no idea what he was getting into. So I said, fine, do you mind if I call you back? So he said, sure. And I'd say about 2 or 3 weeks later, I called him back, and I said, Mr. Hellyer, it's VICTOR VIGGIANI again. Have you reconsidered if you want to be part of this whole thing? And then I said, have you reconsidered? He said, yes, I have. I said, well, what are your views? He said, I will be your keynote speaker. And it just about floored me. I had no idea that he would accept. He had finished reading the book, and as a result of that, and calling a general friend of his in the United States Air Force, who said to him, Mr. Hellyer, everything is true in that book and even more. And this general was instrumental in convincing Paul to come forward at our symposium, and that's how it happened.
And for those who aren't sure, Paul Hellyer was Minister of Defense of Canada in I think it was the 80s? Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, he was with Lester B. Pearson and Trudeau in the 60s.
Yeah. So anyway, so he is the most top-ranking politician, albeit retired, to come forward and talk about all of this stuff. Like Twining was the most decorated war guy to come. Yeah. Well, to give a deathbed confession. Anyway, this is all really great stuff. And do you know what? It's interesting, Victor. I'm noticing as I look around the world about things and how things are progressing, there's a lot coming from Canada. It's just as if the Canadians are very quietly rolling away in the background, and they're developing a lot of things and initiatives. And I think this is really exciting, and your work is all part of that. And I think it's always nice for people to know, your background, a little bit about where you've come from. I know you've probably talked ad nauseum about it, but I can start you off and say, I know you had read a book by Jacques Vallée on the UFO issue, and that maybe piqued your interest all those years ago.
It certainly did. That's what started it all. And at the time, I really had no particular interest in it, but the way this thing grabs you, it just out of the blue, basically, once again, because it was something that was totally unexpected. I was strolling through a bookstore, picked up the book, and began to read it. And I said, "What is this all about?" And it enthralled me. I landed up reading the book 3 times before I even began to understand what Jacques was talking about at the time. And as a consequence, I got involved with MUFON over here in Canada. I separated from that group because I didn't really like their approach to the way things were being cataloged and so on. So it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I began to become more involved in the exopolitical philosophical position, the worldview on how this thing has to become part of an open dialogue in society, and we have to make it okay to talk about it amidst all of the noise that the media creates to subvert that kind of information. So that's basically what we do. We open up dialogue opportunities for people through press releases and different kinds of interviews, tours, everything. That we're doing a lot to not just prove the facts of the matter, because we feel
Ammach Files.
Hello and welcome to program. Now, where are we? Are we 60 or are we 59? My goodness, not another blonde moment. It is the 8th of December and it is 2015. Welcome to the Ammach Files. And as you know, we are on peoplesinternetradio.com. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you to Stephen Roberts, Vin, and all the guys who've been helping me out along the year. How wonderful. So listen, guys, I wanted to just flag up the December 19th Ammach Christmas Bash. So it's a little get-together, 1:30 to 5:30, and we'd love you to come. It's going to be, we've got James Bartley. He's fantastic. He's coming on at 2:30 to give us about an hour or so. He's got some Q&A time as well for us built in, and he's going to tell us about MyLabs, the military connection with the ET stuff, and all that good stuff. If you want to come, do come along on the day. Send me an email to amash@hotmail.co.uk to let me know. There'll be mulled wine, mince pies, and some other goodies and nibbles. I'll be giving you the lowdown on things Ammach and the next phase of development for that. And I hopefully will be sharing some very interesting case files. So do be there. It's £20. So it's plenty of time if you want in the morning to do your Christmas shopping or to do a little bit more bits and bobs on that crumble time, and also in the evening. If you want to stay on for an hour or so afterwards, I'm sure we'll be there. So that is the Ammach Christmas Do on the 19th, and that is a Saturday. So we've got Canadian things tonight, and I have a fellow Canuck with me, and I now know that it is not a naughty thing to say. So I'm glad about that. I didn't know if I was offending somebody by calling them a Canuck. Anyway, it's lovely. So I am also that Canuck. And I was just having a look at some of the Canadian X-Files. One of the things that came up, a case that I looked at a long time ago, is called the Shag Harbour incident in Nova Scotia. And it happened on the 4th of October, 1967. It is a huge case. There were multiple sightings all over Nova Scotia and in that area on that evening, and multiple witnesses with some photographs. There were fishermen out there, and there were the Royal Mounted Canadian Police there. All kinds of people have written up articles and information about this, but it is still yet to be officially recognized, though I am told by my guest, I'll tell you about him in a moment, that there may be something coming down the pipe that could make a difference. Some news, so we'll watch this space, and I will let you know if I hear anything about that. But the Shag Harbour incident is known as the Canadian Roswell, though there's lots and lots of things that have been going on in Canada. Now, the Shag Harbour incident happened around 11 o'clock at night, and various parties of people around the area saw it. And what they saw was what appears to be some kind of craft, they think crashing into the waters down there. And there was all kinds of stuff going on. Now, about 30 miles away, where this craft also ended up for a time was one of Canada's most sensitive Canadian installations, shared with the Americans at the time, which was, I believe it was a listening post for underwater magnetic resonant capabilities. I'm not quite sure what that was called, but basically they were checking the waters for Russian subs and all things like that. But basically they could tell anything that was on the waters, the kind of configuration, the boats, the ships, and everything else. So there was a huge interference that night. And whilst the Canadians have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police initially were quite open and said yes, there was something, because they were called to a scene where there were some youngsters out having a good time, and everybody was just astonished. But the Canadians, like most of us out in that sort of area, they take life as it comes. They thought it was a plane initially, so they dispatched some of the fishermen out there. It's a big fishing area down in that neck of the woods. And so there were, I'm not quite sure how many boats, 2, 3, maybe more, who were dispatched. And what they saw was not only a light in the sea, but they also saw quite a stretch of a very dense, thick, slightly yellow foam. And it was reported also to have a slightly sulfurous smell to it. It also had some uncommon properties when it was impeded, when it had matter put on top of it as well. So it has some very interesting, strange elements to it, and I don't know if that has ever been analyzed. I don't know if there's been any work done on that, but that would be interesting to find out. Anyway, so the Shag Harbor incident, I will do, before this year's out, I'm going to get some people together and do a proper shakedown of that whole incident, because it really is such an important case. And it is one of those that has quietly lain in the archives for a very long time. And I know that have been a lot of work, including people like Don Ledger. There's a documentary with a guy called Chris Stiles that you can see. It's about 48, 50 minutes. That gives you the lowdown on it, but it is really interesting. And it just goes to show you, folks, we are absolutely being engaged. So now I want to come on to my wonderful Canadian guest this evening, and this is Victor Viggiani. We had a fantastic pre-show chat the other evening, and honestly, I don't know how we're going to fit everything in. But before we do, Victor has been working in this field for, gosh, over 30 years, and he puts out something called Zealand Communication. That's Z and land, and we'll put this information will be on the blog spot as well. The pod spot. So you can see all that, and you can also contact Victor if you want with any other details or information you might be interested in things Canadian. So there's one or two things that we didn't get to talk about, Victor, that after the song we'll have a chat about, and one of those things is the Resonance Project as well, the Resonance film. I want to talk to you about that with Dr. Lana Marconi, and I was trying to get her on the show as well, but we just weren't able to connect. But anyway, I want to hear all about that and hear about some of Canada's latest stuff and your own work. So first of all, folks, we're going to have Star People by George Michael from 1997. And he's singing that gorgeous song. And gosh, that's so nice. I like that. So we'll be on with Victor just after this song. Thanks, Stephen. Take it away. Oh, that was lovely. I think I needed that. A little bit of George Michael. So Victor Viggiani, welcome to the Ammach Files on this December day. Thank you for making the time. How lovely to have you here.
It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you. Terrific.
So I wanted to introduce your Zealand Communications News Network, because it is quite an operation, and you've been doing this work for 30 years. And as you say, it's dedicated to UFO and ET disclosure. And I had the Honourable Paul Hellyer on the show back in May, I think it was. And then you told me that you actually had a hand in his coming forward. And I think before we get onto your thing, I would just love to hear about that.
Oh, it's a 1,000,001 shot at everyone